Okay, so theoretically, we're live. Can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. Can't wait for the whitewash by Gertis. That's the first comment I'm reading. Okay, I think you have to understand that there's a difference between trying to provide context and whitewashing. There's a big difference between those two things. But I'm happy to entertain what you think I whitewash. So let's start with that. That should be fun. Mikkel Jensen, Mikkel Jensen. Why don't you tell me what you think I'm whitewashing? And we'll start with that. Okay, so I'll wait for your other questions here, and we'll get started. There's a lot to talk about. I'll say so. Alex is here. Jonathan's here. If you are a someone with moderation like powers, please make sure that anybody that is uh, abusive to others gets washed out. Otherwise, if they are just have questions, like the guy that wants to ask me about how I whitewash things, that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fair game. I'm happy to have free discussions, just not abusive things to other people here. And Alex or Jonathan, I can't figure out how to have you have powers or whoever else is in moderation land. I can't figure out how to make you star things but if you cut and paste somebody's thing, I'll look for you. Like if Jonathan cuts copies and pastes something from somebody that you think is a good question and pops that in, I'll look for you guys and then address those questions as we go along. All right, so I'm still waiting for this whitewashing question, and I haven't heard anything from Mikkel Jensen. So if that pops up, I'll be happy to answer it. In the meantime, there are a few other things interesting here. I can never pronounce. Can you spell phonetically how I'm supposed to say "go Hibinu go"? Because here's saying 9 a.m. I'll need 2 pots of coffee. Okay, that's fine. But uh, yeah, tell me how to pronounce that properly. And then Joe the dude said the footage of Vlad in his combat fatigues was one of the best clips I'd seen in 3 years. But an absolute dork. Sorry, I suppose to be respectful. Yeah, I mean, there's respectful, and then there's, I mean, but okay, so let's talk about why Putin's wearing fatigues. Like I'm wearing green. This happens to be a St. Javelin, whatever, but I'm not like parading like I'm in charge of something. And he is in charge of it, but he hasn't been to the front line. Somebody put a comment about how this is Putin in cosplay trying to pretend to be Zelensky. Like, now, why did he actually go to the front lines? And that's really an interesting thought. So let's look at this. In fact, let me make that a little bit bigger. Okay, so this was what you're seeing here is the Kursk direction, and Kursk is really it's been the Russians have done a good job pushing the Ukrainians out. I've got to give them that. Okay, and that's not whitewashing. Let's see, did we get our whitewash question guy back yet? Did he say anything else? I don't see him. Mikhail Jensen. I'm looking for Mikhail Jensen. So that's not whitewashing. That's explaining context of what's actually happening. I don't want that to happen, but that's apparently what's going on. And so they cut the supply lines. They had a good job. The Russians did a good job of cutting the Ukrainian supply lines. They did a good job of pushing on them with drones. Like when they first got into Kursk, I couldn't figure out how did they just get into Kursk. Well, they had lots of jamming devices with them when they got in, and it was like kind of they didn't see this coming. But the Russians have been putting pressure all along. I was watching Georgie last night from Ukraine Matters, and he was talking about this, and it looks like one of the things that's happened here is that yeah, Putin's double. I'm not gonna argue that this is Putin's double. I don't know about those kind of things, and so I'm not gonna try to wade into that kind of water. But now there's lots of Russians that have to be pinned down around here just to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen again. Will there be some Ukrainians that have to stay here? Yeah, sure. But there'll also be Russian units that are taking pressure off the east in order to, and so they were successful in that regard. Um, it is very sad to see that Kursk, which was upwards of 1,000+ square kilometers, is now reduced to that. But I mean, that's just where they are at this point. And good on the Ukrainians for having brought it that far. Another comment here was, how hard would it be for Russia to stop the war machine? What would he do with the troops if he agreed to a ceasefire? So there are some economists that think that he would be in some significantly bad shape if you like put your questions in here, by the way. And I'll start getting to it. Okay, so this is one. I'll get back to the war machine thing in just a second. This is what I mean. So this is one of my moderators saying, Trev 007, what happens if Russia attacks the peacekeepers? So moderators, I'll look for you, and if you have those kind of things, do exactly this, and I'll try to answer those questions. Of course, I'll also honor your what is it, super chats if anybody does that. But this is what I'm going to look for from the moderators if you have something. So I'll come back to that in just a moment. And yeah, so let's go back to the last question I was just talking about, which was this. How hard would it be for Russia to stop the war machine? What would he do with the troops? If so, some economists like Joe Bloggs and others are looking at it like, hey, Putin really has a significant problem, because if the shaping to a war machine footing is very different from the economy. The dislocation that's already taken place in the economy, like some businesses have already gone under, and you can't really just go back. Okay, go back. You're no longer at the factory. Go back to wherever. Well, that wherever that you worked at before may or may not still exist. May or may not be able to employ you. You might not have a job. So it's a very hard thing to try to sort out whether they can even do that. There'll be massive dislocation trying to get things back to normal. One, I don't know that Putin actually wants to do that. So that's the first thing. But the second part, excuse me, I'm not sick, but where I live in the country, I have allergies, and this is pollen season. And so for the next like 4 weeks is going to be brutal for me. But I mean, it's just what it is. So I don't know that he wants to do that, but even if you wanted to go back and do this, I don't know that he could. I mean, I really don't know that if he does this, it won't have massive dislocation throughout his economy, and he does not want to have massive dislocation throughout his economy. Okay, so I want to go back to this one. Do you think that Waltz and Rubio are still pro-Ukraine and just do what Trump expects them to do? Both Waltz and Rubio have bona fides that I think they recognize what Russia is, and they're trying to carry out the boss's orders. That's Trump's orders, and do work on behalf of the administration. But I think you could almost tell by Rubio's body language the other day in the Oval, like, oh, this is bad, right? As he was like slinking down in his chair. Yeah, so I think that they understand it, but they're trying to work through that sort of thing. Okay, Alex Kilmov had posted this for Trev 007. What happens if Russia attacks peacekeepers? That'll be bad theoretically, but we just don't know yet, right? I mean, so there's no peacekeepers on the ground. We don't know how that'll play out. We don't know what kind of deal they're going to make. But I think, let me rephrase that, Trev 007. I think, what are the odds that they will do this? And I think the odds that Russia will do this or will break an agreement given enough time is very, very high. So, I mean, there is that. And yeah, I think that's where we're actually going to be. And I don't know. I'm not sure how to even put a I've got to learn how to make this work. I'm a pretty bad at this kind of thing with live streaming. I wish I could figure out how to give a poll. I don't think that there's a scenario where Putin doesn't violate this within some time. I was looking up, I even used some AI to look at like how quick were agreements violated after they were made between Russia and Ukraine, and they were violated very quickly, very often. Okay. Do you think that Waltz and Rubio, okay, we already got that one. Here is another one. Without the war, Russia will have to deal with the economy. I think that's exactly right. That's how it's going to. I mean, and does Putin really want to do that? Professor Gertis live on Saturday morning. Awesome. I'm glad you think so. I'm a far cry from Saturday morning cartoons, which I thought were awesome. And our children will never know, like my children and generations below will never know the pain of having to wait until Saturday morning to get up and watch TV. They get everything that they want. Like you can go to watch any cartoon that you ever wanted to watch right now. At any rate, thanks for showing up, and thank you. If you hit the like button, I appreciate that as well, because that helps this kind of thing spread. And thank you in advance for doing those kind of things. Um, this was interesting. Unlock Germany by letting them rearm. Isn't it a weird world that we live in when we think about what World War II was? It was Germany, well, Germany and Japan, give or take Italy, right? Germany and Japan against the most of the rest of Europe, the United States, China, Russia, like, and then you got into the Cold War, which we know how that works, was basically a Soviet versus U.S. and Europe face off, and then now we're wait, Germany and Japan. We're trying to get them to rearm because China's the threat that and Russia is a threat, and it almost hurts your head to try to figure out who's doing what. Stretch said, "Welp, I'm out. I get mass ignored." I didn't see it. Stretch, what did you have? I'm not trying to ignore you. I'm just trying to explain some things, and somehow we missed it. Stretch, I guess he was. I guess he was skipping around. Hope he hits it. Come on, Stretch. My first question never got answered or blown off. Okay, Stretch, I'm trying here. Um, it's not sad. It's BS. 100% Trump's fault. He didn't. What was the question, Stretch? Okay. I don't see Stretch. Anybody see Stretch? Stretch. Oh, here it is. Do you think it's intentional? This is intentional. The destruction of NATO, EU allies, Ukraine, and the American economy. Are we being set up for internet intentional martial law? No, I don't think so. I think that Trump thinks that some of the things that he's doing are going to be just huge and great kind of things. Maybe it's looking at only one side of the coin or whatever, but like so just look at like tariffs. Why are we doing tariffs? Why are we doing that? Well, they're taking advantage of us and all the money that's flowing in. Mhm. But on the other side of tariffs are bad relations. I can get the no, I'm a free marketeer myself, right? I think free trade is going to be a far better thing than whatever tariffs. If you want to go one for one, you give us this tariff, we're giving you that tariff back. Okay, that you can do that, but I don't know that that's necessarily the greatest idea either. But tariffs are okay. So then you're talking about pressuring Canada. You're going to be the 51st state and whatever. Okay, that's to make some kind of deal that I just don't quite understand fully why he's doing that, which I don't think is a great idea either. And then the Greenland thing. If you really want Greenland, you should be talking behind closed doors about, hey, guys, how can we work together? What can we do to make ourselves, uh, as friendly as possible in order to keep this or that? But he just does it from the bully pulpit because that's kind of an easy way to do that. Yeah, I mean, I think this is right. Trump's using his business talent on the international stage. When you say business talent, I think Trump's talent is primarily in marketing. Like he's a salesman, and that's his strongest suit. And I think this bullying posture of this, it's more like a hostile takeover than it is like a white knight. I talked about this in a video just a few days back, where like you should be thinking in those kinds of terms. Like, but I guess when you're a hammer, all you see are nails, right? Um, I think that's where we are. Okay, what other questions do you have here? Um, Professor, a few days ago, you mentioned a person doing a fundraiser, and I wasn't able to click on the link to find more about it. Can you post a link to it now? So what I was looking at, oh, I think this is what you're talking about. Um, yeah, this. Wait, where's this? Hold on, it's gone. Okay, there we are. See if that shows up now. There we go. I hope. Come on. There we are. Technology United for Ukraine. So basically, the idea here is that if you have some kind of skills, you're a engineer or something in cyber, or you work with nuclear or something, or you whatever it is that your background is, you can donate that back or that understanding to this group to be able to help work with uh, the AFU and in some capacity to help them, iterate and improve on some of their technology so that they can be more effective. You don't have to go to Kyiv or to Ukraine in order to do that. You can do some things virtually wherever you are. I think this is a great way of. There's a pent up demand. People want to be able to help, and they don't necessarily know how to help. And okay, but by the way, if you have a background, particularly, and I put this out yesterday and I'm putting this out again today, I did my daily brief, but I haven't posted it yet. I'm going to post it after this. If you have, if you're like retired, particularly, you have some time on your hands and you have project management skill, they really need it because they got a lot of volunteers and they need to organize their volunteers in a meaningful way. So uh, you can subscribe below, and there's a volunteer list, volunteer sign up thing on here below where you fill out this thing, put my name in there as well, so they know how where you came from, how to organize. Again, I don't get any kind of kickback or anything for that. There's nothing that I benefit from, but that way you can be in part of a group that they know where you're coming from. And then if you have any kind of project management kind of experience and you're already in the group, reach out to Brian, the moderator, and he needs you kind of people that have this project management experience so that we can organize other additional small groups because they have a glut. Okay. Yeah. So, Sumaya Cow. I absolutely love the engineers for Ukraine. I'm an engineer. Yeah. The same. This is the kind of thing. Like if you can volunteer and you have this time and ability, like I'm doing what I can. I'm donating my time and my talents, right? My talents are trying to explain things as simply as possible and cut through and see what is, um, what are legitimate things that we should cite and what are things that we probably shouldn't run off into left field because that's a conspiracy theory or somebody made it up or that sort of thing. Okay. So Nico said they put the contact form in. Sometimes zero response. They're overwhelmed. That's why I'm saying the people that have project management kind of background, they need this kind of thing in order to make sure that they can get people that have put stuff in and get you into that group, so that you can start using that. They very quickly went up, okay. Ricardo Zeno for Professor Gertis. Do you think that Trump foreign policy is similar to that of Gaddafi? That's a question I never thought I would see. From 69 to 2011, like Trump is primarily an opportunist. Oh, that's a really interesting question. So thank you for flagging that. And when you when I see my moderators flag something, I will try my best to make sure that I attend to those. And if I don't, just put it in again and again because that's perfectly all right. Um, yeah, do I think that his foreign policy is similar to? Yeah, he is an opportunist. He is very, like, people will say, well, oh, this goes back to that first thing that did that person ever show up, Mitchell, whatever, again, saying, explaining why I whitewash things or whatever they were saying. It's not whitewashing. It's Trump is not a normal politician in the sense that he doesn't have an ideological core, like a Obama. You could tell he was going this way, or Romney. You could tell Romney was going that way. You just don't see that. Um, and that becomes problematic. Okay. Next question here. Rose F VFI. I'm just going to say Rose. Some country, China mainly, uses their economy to wage war by massively subsidizing their economy. The appropriate measure are important import quotas, not tariffs. Yeah, that's right. There are economies that do that sort of thing. Um, so, okay, they have import tariffs. I don't know that why the trade imbalance is that problematic that we have to be doing what we're doing, but I mean, okay, so they're not buying American stuff. Plenty of people are buying American stuff, and at the same time, I consumers are benefiting from this, and that's what's going to happen. That's the downside of the tariffs is that consumers are going to be hurt by having to spend more. It's like the government gets more money, but the consumer doesn't, and so citizens are worse off. Yeah. Okay. Um, okay. Well, let's look at this, Professor Gertis. Why do you think that despite strong words and material or money, no countries stand together and send actual troops, not even support roles? I think that there is a threat of nukes as the big picture, but nobody wants to be the country that does that. There were kind of always so this is the problem with something like a NATO or an alliance when you're like, hey, we're strong. Well, you're strong together. Do you remember uh do you remember the cartoon series Voltron? When I was growing up, I remember watching this. So there was this um this robots, well, not robots, these pilots are these guys here. Let me see. I'm not even showing it on the screen, am I? Dun, 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 dun. These pilots over here, they pilot these little like I don't know why they're made in the shape of like lions, these little flying things, and then they're all getting themselves individually. Every episode, it was like Gilligan's Island. In every episode, they're getting beaten by whoever their opponent is, and then they come together into this a massive thing called Voltron. This like there's 5 of them, and they become arms and legs and the torso of this massive robot thing that is just so much bigger than their adversaries, and they can they wield a sword and just beat the bad guys. Okay, the EU is like Voltron, right? If they hang together, they can do very fairly well, and if they don't hang together, well, then they have other problems. Uh, Cheryl, if you don't mind, um, I'm putting you out there as well, Cheryl. If you don't mind, I've made you a moderator. You don't have to. You can turn me down and not do anything, and I'll undo it. But I trust you long enough. You've been out here. Yeah, after 3 years on probation. And what I'm doing with that is I'm paying attention to you moderator types and saying if you are out there, if you flag something, just flag the question, and I'll like go to your questions that you have flagged, so that we can kind of hit some of the better questions rather because I'm a pretty bad live streamer. Yeah, Cheryl is a good choice. I mean, she's everywhere. I don't mean to like make her work extra or anything, but she may have questions that she wants to see flagged as well. So just flag those kinds of questions and we'll do it. At any rate, the idea here was if the EU hangs together, that's tough. But just by themselves, they're far weaker and they know that. And so, yeah. All right. Geopolitics is a hard and cutthroat business. President Trump went in using his art of the deal tactics and strategies against Russia's well-honed negotiators. I hope Trump learned and adjust. Well, okay. He really does like talking about how he's a big deal maker, but his identity is in being a deal maker. And so now you got to watch out for something here because like well, I'm the greatest deal maker, then you have to kind of like live up to that identity and make a deal. So now who has the greatest pressure to make the deal? Is it Ukraine or is it Russia or is it Trump? I think Trump actually has more pressure to make a deal than Ukraine or Russia. Okay, here's another one that just popped up. I don't know how to pronounce your name, and I'm going to destroy it accidentally, and I don't mean to. As an EU citizen, either a peace agreement or not, I'm afraid the Russian threat will remain for the whole EU. In case we don't join hands, it will break the EU. Okay, Voltron, the EU needs to do this, not be these individual. Let's see if we can find the um, individual guys in here in Voltron. Dun, 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 dun. There's an action figure. Anyway, so you get the idea though with what I'm talking about with this. Like these they just have to stick together or they're going to have a significant problem. Yeah, here's the individual, and each of these individual things is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and that's precisely the issue. Old Foggy. This guy here, Old Foggy, has been with me for about as long as anybody. When I was in the low hundreds of subscribers, he was here. So, and by the way, if you've been here since summer of 2022, when you either couldn't hear me or you were looking at me like this, hi, I'm talking about whatever. Um, I appreciate you greatly. If you're in that kind of category, flag me and um, I'll be happy to try to answer your question. I just want to say thank you. Um, from okay, let's see. Morning NP. By the way, he's called me this for some time because I mentioned that I was a nerdy professor, and that just kind of stuck with him. But that's okay. What will the EU do with Hungary? Will Hungary, yeah, get in line with the rest of Europe? I don't know that Hungary will. Hungary is an opportunist as well. Um, uh, I'm coming back to this in just a moment. Hungary is an opportunist, like Trump is, like Gaddafi was, as that was pointed out, where I don't believe they ideologically actually believe some of these things, although maybe Orban's more aligned with Putin than not. I think he's just trying to scam the system. So, okay. John Hoover says, by the way, starting my 4th year in Ukraine. Wow. That's something. Ozzy Boga is on here as well, and I remember him from a long time ago. He's the guy that gave me the great insight that Russians are peasants, Ukrainians or sorry, Russians are serfs, and Ukrainians are Cossacks. And there's just such a difference in the mentality. And so I want to say thank you for that as well. Okay. Jonathan McElravy posted for Richard Stone. Do you think that the U.S. party, that the U.S. parties of either stripe will ever be internationalists, I guess, again, or is that no longer popular in the U.S.? So it's so weird to see what just happened here. Um, it, and did any of you listen to my interview with my cousin Frank? My cousin Frank, it sounds weird to say, well, my interview with my cousin, but he's spent 25 years in the State Department. Well, not in the State Department, in foreign service in multiple countries. Any of you listen to that? Put yes in the comments if you did. One of the things that he and I were talking about, and I don't know that we really got into this deeply in the, if you haven't, go back and listen to that. Let me see. Um, proof. Um, and I'm going to the Spotify one because it was like just a still image of him in here. So if you give me a second, let me get to here. If you go to Professor Gertis Explains in Spotify, just type in Professor Gertis Explains Spotify on Google. And let's go down to, by the way, I put some things out here that you otherwise wouldn't hear. Like here, this top one is Pierce, Terry, Fink, and Gertis about the ceasefire. This was a thing that uh, I was just happened to join Johnny Pierce's live stream, and Jonathan Fink also joined us at the same time. And then we just had this like really interesting discussion because Johnny threw out this thing. Well, would you assassinate Putin if you could? And different people had different answers. I was of the I want him to stand trial and see like before the world before like he gets real justice of execution or whatever it is. And others were and like, no, I would execute him. Well, you can't execute him. That's not the rules of war. Well, yes, it is the rule. We got into this really interesting discussion. At any rate, I was going over here to show you this one. Where is it? With my cousin Frank. Putin said, let's see, which one is it? I just went back a little bit. I think I understand the countries. Let's see. Will Russia take the deal? My interview with the Kyiv Post. Oh, yeah. I also put my interview with the Kyiv Post out here, which was a couple of days back. And what's really happening, my interview with UATV is on there. That's not on YouTube. So there's actually a lot of these. At any rate, so I was showing you this to show, and I'll give you the link. I'll put that in the chat if anybody's interested, because you can see some things that you can't see on YouTube, and that's not by design necessarily. It's like I'm not competing with the Keith post, and so there's the link on YouTube, and just click on or just type in Spotify and professorgertis.com in Google, and it'll come up. There's nobody else competing with me for that name. But when I was talking to him, we are talking about like there's something really interesting that's happened where uh, uh, there's been a shift in the country where before Trump, Republicans were the hawks and the Democrats were kind of the doves, and historically had been the doves. And during the 1960s, 70s, during fall of communism and that sort of thing, 80s, the Democrats were still on the kind of like, yeah, we don't really want to get involved in that kind of thing. And then there's a big shift, and that shift happened just around the time of the Russian collusion kind of story. And Republicans went from really hawkish to much less hawkish, and Democrats went from much less hawkish to really hawkish. He was explaining that this was, and he talked about this in the discussion that we had as well. But he was talking about this as there's been a real concerted Russian media effort, and this is Russia using social media and other talking points in order to shift the Republican Party away from support for Ukraine. And I think that there's something legitimate about that. Okay. Let's see here. Hey, Prof, given the reality on the battlefield and the obvious impossibility to ever remove the Russians, shouldn't Ukraine take a new frontier where the line is now Dnipro River and across? I'm not a military expert, and I'm not going to argue any military expert kind of stuff. I start my videos with I'm just a professor, and I get it's so fascinating how I get clobbered from both directions for doing the same thing. Some people say, nah, this isn't clobbering, but some people say, no, you're not just a professor. I didn't mean it like that. I'm saying I'm not a military guy. And some people will say, he says he's a professor. What kind of professor is he? Or is he really a professor? Or why is he trying to be arrogant and say he's a professor? Like, I'm just saying I'm not a military guy. This is where I come from. I analyze things and try to unpack and explain things as simply as possible. This is what I do. Okay. My bet, Alex Kilmoff says, is America's isolationism movement is Russian influence through social media. That's what my cousin Frank was saying. I've got to find the if anybody's out there, can you tell me which episode it was? It was only like 4 days ago or something, but I put out a lot. If you can identify the one and put it in the chat, I'll highlight it. But it's Beyond Zigzag Theory, Ukrainian defenders. Somebody, if you can do that, you'd be my hero. Thank you. I'll highlight that. But you're right, Alex. That's exactly right. America's isolationism movement is Russian influence. I think there is something to that. That's been pushed more and more, and you hear this, and I'm like, it's a discordant note within the Republican Party. Where we're like, wait, since when are we like that? And so, it made me think that I think in either party you find some of this, whatever, like, okay, if you just take a political statement on its surface and you say this should or shouldn't happen, this thing should happen, and you didn't know who said it, like you could agree with that, and then you hear that, oh, Chuck Schumer said it, no, I don't want that, or Trump said it, oh no, I don't want that, and it's a fascinating thing to watch. I mean, we should be looking at this through some kind of veiled, sorry, what did Rawls call it? Veil of ignorance. If we're looking at it through that rather than through whoever's saying it. Cheryl, you said you noticed that the moderator guidelines flag bad words. This ain't Mercado Media, Operator Starsky, or Ukraine Matters, where bad words are special emojis. Yeah, I mean, I try to keep things pretty family friendly while I'm talking about some pretty serious things. I also try to keep people from denigrating others in the process, and many of those are used to you're blanking this and blanking that. So that's part of what's going on there. It's a little different. Okay, Jared Meyer says, please read John Bolton's book. In the Room Where It Happened, shows Trump's unintellectual nature, asking if Finland was part of Russia before Putin meeting. Well, part of Finland was part of Russia, but that's only because Russia kind of stole it from them. And there is some kind of going back and forth historically of certain parts of the ground. But yeah, I've Googled some, and it's on my short list of things to actually get to read. But you can imagine my time is it's hard to kind of get to some things sometimes. Okay. Um, let's see. Uh, Alex Kilmoff, true, but the seeds were already, and the U.S. swings that way frequently. Yeah, there was an isolationist movement from pre-World War II, and you'd have like Charles Lindbergh advocating for that, but it was always a minority voice, and and before World War One, I mean, Woodrow Wilson campaigned on he kept us out of war, so there is that kind of thing, but within the last 50 years or so, Republicans have been the hawks. It's kind of a weird thing to see what's going on here. Okay, what other questions do you have? Peter Zion, a well-known Democrat and geopolitical commentator, stated a renegotiation of Bretton Woods, where America paid for control of security through trade and military support. You agree? I think that what Trump actually wants to do is lighten America's load and say we're being ripped off and we got to stop being the policeman for the world. Now there's some truth to the idea that we are spending far more than other nations on this, and there's some truth that like Europeans are not paying what they maybe ought to be paying for their defense because they're hovering under our umbrella. Um, but to do what Trump is proposing to do seems just crazy to me. Like, do you want to sacrifice your influence in the world? Do you really want to do that? Um, so I teach leadership courses, and one of the most interesting things that I've stumbled on over time is that uh, as you rise in leadership, you sacrifice your independence. It looks exactly the opposite way around, but that's what you wind up doing if you're doing this right. You're losing your own because you have more and more on your shoulders. Your time is no longer your own. That sort of thing. And I think that's the same kind of thing with the international relations. Like if we want to, so we can either lead and have all the benefits of leadership, or we can sacrifice that leadership and then have none of the benefits of being the world's leader. And I'm not sure that that's exactly where we want to go. I think that's a bad idea. Um, he's only telling half the story here. Okay, so what else do you want to talk about with a ceasefire rather than Trump? Because you can go all day on Trump and not get anywhere. But the ceasefire, Putin's response, things along those lines. Here's another question here. The random interest. Could Ukraine withdrawing from Kursk be a strategy to escalate the war by bringing North Koreans inside you? Whoa, that is such a great question. Wow. Now, I don't think that they would want to do that necessarily. But yeah, if North Koreans spill across the Ukrainian border, that now you've changed something. Um, that's a really interesting thought. Um, I don't know that they would do that for that, but this could be the silver lining to a dark cloud. I think that the idea that they had to flee as they had to flee because their supply lines were cut. And by the way, this whole thing um, that Trump is Trump was repeating the line that there are these Ukrainians that are surrounded, and I was watching Preston Stewart last night talking about like is he getting this from Putin, like on a telephone call saying, hey, look, we have these guys, these thousands and thousands of Ukrainians surrounded, and we won't kill them. This is our side of the deal, we're being good. Maybe that's what's going on. I don't, I don't, I don't know. Zion is not a Democrat. He's a moderate independent. I'm having trouble. Okay. So I think that, at least from where I stand, he sounds pretty left to me, even if he's independent, whatever. He's still on the left side of the spectrum. Nothing that he has said makes me think that he's coming to a Republican convention anytime soon. So Kursk withdrawal is strategic on many levels. I think it is. I think it's not optimal, but it is strategic. They're protecting. So if you just look at the protecting their soldiers when they can't really support it, I think part of this is they've had plenty of time to create really much stronger lines behind Kursk if they, to build that out. And so I don't know everything that's going on. And again, my strong suit is not I'm more comfortable talking about like why the politicians did what they did or are going to do what they're doing than the battlefield kind of stuff, because I'm just a professor, right? I mean, I had 2 years of Army ROTC in college before President Clinton killed my program as part of the peace dividend, but I'm not bitter. Okay, so let's see where we are. What are the questions? Cheryl says Democrats are supporting Ukraine because they're so clearly the victim this time. Russia is the aggressor, except yo to the fringe left. I'm not sure except yo to the fringe left is, but we had this conversation early on. I was scratching my head, and Cheryl was one of the people answering this. I think the right-leaning Republicans. This is an overstatement, but in general, I think the people like me that are still conservatives that are, when I say right leaning, I mean MAGA is not, you call it the far right, but it actually looks more left, or it's not. It's like there's left, there's right, and then it's like I'm way over here still. Yeah, I know some of you, I think I'm moderate. I'm just polite and kind, but I'm still over here with Reagan, right? MAGA is someplace here or down here or something. It's not really on the further to the right on the political spectrum. It's just weird. I don't know how to describe it. So we had this conversation some time ago where, like, why did you come to support Ukraine? Was it because and he said Democrats are supporting Ukraine because they're clearly the victim? Is it because Ukraine's the victim or because Russia is the aggressor? And I think, and this is just speculation, I didn't do any kind of survey or anything like this, but I think from that which I have detected, people like me come to it because Russia shouldn't do this. This is wrong. They can't do this to another nation. And it happens to be Ukraine that's a nation. And the Democrats come to it as Ukraine. How could they be victimized like this? And Ukraine is being victimized by that nation over, like, we're saying the same thing, but from different angles. And it's really an interesting thing to watch. Okay, I've missed some of these comments. Oh, by the way, the first guy that told me about whitewashing stuff, did he ever peep back up again? Anybody see that thing? And did anyone post that my cousin Frank's episode? I'm trying to look back through the. It's hard to have a conversation and try to read simultaneously. It's a very weird experience. You didn't. Alex says he didn't see him. Okay, so let's just get back to other questions then as well. Steve Kursk. Steve Kursk served its purposes. Steve says Kursk served its purposes, drawing troops from the front lines in Ukraine and helped Ukraine sort the front lines out to their advantage. Yeah, I think that's pretty fair, and they have had time to support and create their own defenses and that sort of thing. And yeah, I think that's an accurate statement. Okay, I'm trying to read through some of these comments here. First served its purposes. Okay, good. Okay. Well, so what else? Let's see here. Trump's foreign policy is subject to his misinformation base. Yeah. I think you're spot on with that, because like I hear him say that there are thousands of troops surrounded. And like, I just did my morning video looking at like where things are on the battlefield. Like, and again, I'm not that expert, but I don't see any pockets anywhere. And then I see other experts that are like, generals that are retired saying there's nothing surrounded. What are you talking about? And I'm thinking, like, who is in the information space advising him with this? Like, certainly Walt should know better, but I think he's getting this like Preston Stewart was talking about directly from Putin and going, yeah, okay, yeah, Putin's going to be nice. Putin's going to make a deal here. I think that's what's going on. Yeah, Xeon is a free markets guy, but that's more of a he's more of an internationalist and libertarian simultaneously. That's not necessarily conservative. I don't detect much other conservative kind of stuff with Zion. But that doesn't mean he's not smart. And I highlight him periodically because, like, I don't have to agree with somebody on everything to see that they said something that was smart. Um, okay. You can't run away from being right wing by saying MAGA is upwing or downwing. I'm not. I'm running toward being right wing. I actually am a very conservative guy. So I'm not running from that. That's not what I'm saying at all. Okay. Let's see. Trump's foreign policy was misinformation. We talked about that. Okay. What other questions do you have for me? Because if we don't have other questions, we can just pull a pause and be done. But I'm just trying to answer. I've realized that I kind of need to do this because answering your questions is there's a lot of value in what you're focused on, and what I focus on wouldn't necessarily be the same thing as what you'll focus on. James Andrew Real says, would Europe be exposed to a Russian attack if there are peacekeepers in Ukraine? So Putin will say yes. So, and by the way, the last thing that Putin wants is for Ukraine to be contaminated by all these NATO people, even if it's not under NATO's flag in Ukraine, as like that's bringing NATO closer to him. So he doesn't want that. Um, let's see. Have you heard any response? Because I haven't. From the Trump administration to Zelensky's concern when he asked JD Vance what diplomacy. I mean, it's a legitimate question. Putin breaches agreements. No, I haven't heard anything. And uh, yeah, I mean, I just haven't heard anything. Um, what is for dinner tonight? Hamburgers. We're grilling out. So I don't know that that's helpful, but that's to answer your question. That's an easy one. Um, let's see. Professor Gertis is a good, decent ma. I think you mean man, not ma. I'd be a terrible mom. Those who think deriding him achieves anything positive are part of the problem of U.S. politics. Thank you for saying that, Ozzy. That's very kind of you. I've actually taken far more grief from people that hate Trump and want to say that I'm somehow defending Trump when I'm just trying to provide context to who he is. I try to call it as clearly as I can, and I give Biden props where he deserved props, and I gave him grief where he deserved grief, and I try to do the same thing. Of course, I have a blind spot where I can't see. A blind spot by default means you can't see it. But I put my cards on the table and say, "Hey, this is who I am, and this is how I'm seeing things." But I probably got at a 10-to-1 ratio of grief from the left than I have from Russian trolls. That is terrible. I mean, it's just I get, and now I probably get now with that same thing. I also get grief from some MAGA at a smaller scale. It's probably closer to with the Russian trolls from MAGA folks saying you're picking on Trump too much. Really? Like, first, Trump won't mind if he's getting picked on. He seems to like that kind of thing. But there are people on the MAGA side that say like, "Hey, okay. Stretch, is this the same Stretch that we talked about before? I respect Curtis. That's why I'm here and watch him. We do agree on most politically, but I think it's important to get others' perspectives out. This isn't the same guy that said that thing earlier about whitewashing stuff, is it? Because if it is, I want to know how I'm whitewashing it. I'm not just pushing back and saying, don't talk. I want to hear how you think that I'm whitewashing things because I'm not. I'm trying to provide context. That's kind of important. Um, Cheryl asked, "What do you think about Tulsi Gabbard as director of national intelligence?" I think it's horrible for her to be in that particular position, given the ripple effect that it's going to have to our friends and allies around the world who will not trust her, given her past statements. I think it's a very bad place to be. Um, okay, what else? Let's see. Um, as a liberal, I miss Reagan Republicans who I could actually argue and debate with. Part of why I enjoy watching you. I think you're too easy on Trump, but you're no MAGA. I am no MAGA. I'm not easy on Trump, but I I'm also I try to put the best face on everybody first as a starting point until they prove that I can't do that. And oh, that was a different guy. Okay, so uh all right. Um yeah, that would make sense of why, he said what he said, because this is a different guy than the other guy. Yeah, so I try to be kind to everyone and put the best face on it rather than running off into a conspiracy theory. If you do that, you might be too kind, but that's a worse crime than running off into lies and conspiracy and things that you can't prove just because you're wound up about things. So that is my default position. I do not want to run into you're easy on you're easy on Trump because you don't understand just what a sick vi no, I understand he's got, these issues that he's got. Just I mean, he marches to a very different drum, but I again, I'm going to try to be kind. That's my default position. So okay. Um Let's see here. I reformulate. Shouldn't Ukraine openly accept the borders where they currently are to give Trump realistic ground to go talk with Russia? What? I'm not sure. So, so to say that is to assume like there is no moral something involved here, like no moral um, violation where Russia invaded its neighbor. Like if I broke into your house and took stuff and then said, wait a minute, like this armful of stuff and this load of stuff I have in my car, I should get to keep that, Mr. Police Officer. I mean, they were fighting with me too. Like you don't understand. See, look at this bruise that I have where they twisted my arm trying to stop me. I just can't do that. So and so like Krasnov equals Trump. I talked about this. I just don't know that there's legitimate evidence about that, but I mean I could be wrong. And if I'm proven wrong, I'll talk about that I'm proven wrong. But I'm also not going to run into conspiracy stuff in this time. Not easily if I take this particular position of the way that I approach things. Um, let's see. Tomas. Professor, do you think that, and by the way, thank you, Alex and Jonathan and other moderators for being helpful. This flows a lot more smoothly with better questions when you are feeding me the kind of things that you think are good. I really do appreciate that. Uh, Professor, don't you think that any ceasefire would help Russia more by regrouping and strengthening war production? I do think that it would it would help them, but it would also hurt them. It would help Ukraine, but it would also help you hurt Ukraine. It would help Russia, but it would also help them. But I don't think that they actually. The reason that I don't think that they want to go there is because if they do that and then violate a ceasefire, then they're the baddies, and they don't want to be seen as the baddies, even if they want to be the baddies. If that makes sense, like so as long as they haven't agreed to a ceasefire yet, they can keep doing what they're doing. But once they do, and if they do, and then they don't actually uphold that, well, then you have to bring other pressure to bear and that sort of thing. So I think that might be at play, but I don't know. That's my speculation. And I try very carefully to show you the difference between my speculation and here's what I can prove. Um, Send your moderators a link to your live stream software. I think we need to use it for better moderation. Yeah, I'm just I'm inept. Uh, I know a lot about some specific narrow stuff, and I don't know a lot about like this this technology. But yeah, I have to figure this kind of thing out. Um, okay, uh, let's see. Russia will be the attacker again, so they'll have the initiative, and the pause allows them to plan a new strategy. Yes, but it also diminishes them politically in the eyes of the rest of the world. I mean, there might be. So one of the things that I'm not quite sure about is how Russia and China are getting along. And China is clearly the older brother at this point. Um, and I'm not sure if doing something politically bad like that could even turn China against. I just I don't know how this all will play out, and I think they prefer the course of action that they're on toward compared to a different a course of action. Um, okay. Do I think do I think Trump will invade Greenland? No, I don't think so. I think that's all trying to shake them down to negotiate something um, that they want to get something, some kind of concession for them, like China can't come up here, or we want to negotiate mineral rights or something along those lines. I think it's very bad diplomatically. It might be great for a hostile takeover in business, but it's very bad diplomatically. No peace deal is possible. Therefore, when do you think Europe will finally understand and act accordingly? I think Europe is waking up. I think accidentally what Trump did in the with the Oval Office is, I mean, it was terrible. It was disgraceful. I don't think that this was intentional. Yeah, post nasal drip from allergies. That's right. I'm just struggling with allergies. Um, but I think it also woke Europe up in a meaningful way where, you've had 3 years to kinda wrap your minds around this. "Okay, I gotta stop here for a second. Let's go Mets. Alright, George." Okay, I grew up in New Jersey, and I was a Mets fan, and '86 was a big year for us. At any rate, um, uh, so I don't even remember what I was just saying. Well, at any rate, I kinda lost whatever I was saying. What was I just saying? Somebody tell me in the comments where I was. Greenland. Yeah, I don't think he was trying to actually get something. I think he was just trying to negotiate a deal. Oh, Europe. Um, so Europe's been for 3 years on notice, and they should have done it, but they haven't been Voltron yet. And so they're going to be yeah, the Mets is a baseball team, by the way, if you don't know what we're talking about. So Europe has finally gotten the memo, and they're figuring like, "Hey, we got to do something here, and it's about time." And Europe is now not going, "Well, what's the U.S. administration going to do?" They're going, "If the U.S. administration does nothing, and we can't count on that, what are we going to do, knowing that we can't count on that?" And I think that's probably a pretty healthy place uh, for for them to be thinking, and they have to do that because Europe is in real danger. And the closer you are to the Russian border, the more that you understand that. The Brits seem to understand that pretty well, and the French seem to have picked up on that pretty early. But okay, Professor Gertis, do you think that the underlying framework for European treaty organization, free to act independently of the winds of change in the U.S., as is happening now with the Great Betrayer, aka I don't know what those symbols are, but maybe that means something that I should know but don't know. Um, I think the Europeans have to so the Europeans have 2 problems because if they're Voltron, then they have this other problem of waiting around for Voltron, right? So, and this is my analogy here, going back to that Voltron thing, they're waiting around like this in order to become this Voltron character that, they can come together. I think what's actually going to happen is that Europe won't be able to agree as Europe. I mean, look, we're talking about Europe agreeing as Europe. I even saw something floating around about how um, having a all Europe army. If you know the history of Europe, they just fought with themselves all throughout history. So this whole EU kind of experiment is a fairly new kind of thing. So I think the British and the French and maybe some other groups, the Poles and whoever else, may send somebody. Like, I'm just throwing that out there with the Poles. I don't know that the Poles actually have an appetite for this yet. The Poles are trying to secure their own border, but um, the British and the French and maybe some others will send some of their own, independent of an EU or NATO framework in time. I think that's a very likely scenario. Don't know that it will be, but that could be. But they've got to stop thinking about, well, only if we come together as Voltron and start thinking about what we're going to do on our own. And I hope that helps make some sense of the scenario. Um, Professor, you can't assume that every comment is serious and not just trolling. The whitewashing commenter is like that. No, no, no. So thank you, Ed. But I get that a lot. I know that they're trolling, but yeah, I hear a lot of that kind of thing. Well, he's both siding, and no, I'm not both siding. I'm trying to explain. There's there's a difference between, like, I'm very firmly for Ukraine, and I'm simultaneously trying to explain, here's why I think, let's say, Trump is doing what Trump is doing, or here's why I think that the Russians are doing this, or whatever. That's not both siding. That's, yeah. All right. And maybe it's just that from an academic environment, I think more freely in that. Like, this is like something that I spend time doing. Like let's talk about these things and try to understand. Um, this he says, not Magnus Carlson says, I'm watching in South Korea. They're discussing weaker ties with the U.S. based on our wishy-washy defense and land for peace policy with Ukraine. The voices are getting louder on Korean media, as well they should be, because, and so this is what I keep saying, right? If you wanted to tamp down the Xi and his aspirations, firm support for Ukraine is probably the best way to do that. Now, that means more resources here, but that way you don't have to do that then. It's like, um, I don't want my air conditioner to break, so I have it tuned up. I'm spending time and resources that I don't want to spend right now, but then I can make this last longer. Same kind of scenario. I talked about this. This was a point of what I talked about with my cousin Frank, and I couldn't find that particular video, that particular audio on Professor Gertis Explains. It's there. I know it's there. I just don't remember what I titled it. By the way, anybody find that one? Did you figure out? Oh yeah, everyone's canceling their F-35 orders. Yeah, that's starting. We're punishing our own, um, our own industry, um, our military industry, with this. Great. Trying to find how long ago this was. How are okay? Here's the one. Um, this is the one with my cousin Frank. If you want to hear what he had to say, and his career in foreign service, I'm putting this into the chat right now. If that's interesting to any of you, this it's in the chat right now. I could probably even, can I pin something? Let's see if I can pin something. Hold on a second. I don't know. I'm really, really not a great live streamer. I can't delete comment, put user and time. No, I can't. I don't think I can pin it. Okay. At any rate, so that was the one with my cousin Frank, where they're talking about, like, he was a high level, foreign service, like equivalent rank of a brigadier general, but in foreign service, in Japan, New Zealand, and some other places in the Pacific. And so, yeah, that what you just said here is very right. Not Magnus Carlson. And why would they not do that? Without the U.S., Australia won't go to war with China. That is suicide. That's right. I mean, the size of Australia as opposed to China is just, it's not. I mean, population and whatever, it's nuts. And so there's a lot of that Voltron-y kind of way of operating. America's nuclear umbrella is muzzling allies' opposition. If we had our own industries and nuclear weapons, the U.S. could be told to shove it, and treaties to prevent us from having nuclear weapons. Yeah, I mean, so we're adding instability to the, I don't want to say the market, because that's the phrase that when we're talking about, but it's not the market. It's instability to the diplomatic order. Traditional media like the BBC has been criticized for allowing both sides when one side gives a fire hose of lies. Yeah, I understand that, but you have to show what they're saying and then ask, well, why are they saying this? What do you think's going on there? It's not just it, what I'm trying to accomplish is not saying they said this and they said that. Okay, next story. They said this, they said that. That's not what I'm doing. I am saying this is what happened. Here's what, let's say, Trump said. Now, why Trump say that? I think he's doing that because he's trying to say this. I don't know, but if he's trying to say this, this makes sense of why he's doing that. That's not saying that that's a good thing, but that's why that's trying to explain what's going on. Okay. Rosie says, Professor Gertis, can you do more with Dr. Frank? Well, I think so. He's my cousin, so I would imagine he'd be amenable to that. I want to understand more about the Chinese angle. Thanks. Okay. Well, I mean, his episode seemed well received. So, um, can you tell us your strategy for defeating MAGA as it pertains to supporting UA? No, we're vastly outnumbered in my own party, and really there are things around the periphery that can be done. Like there was a video about the suppression of religious rights in Ukraine. Well, that'll go a long way to help counter Tucker Carlson, but Tucker Carlson has what 30 million, I don't know how many. I saw some uh, meme with how many, viewers, 13 million, whatever it was, viewers. I just tipped over 100,000. So we're just not pound for pound, but he will say something like Ukraine is persecuting an entire religion. Well, entire religion means the subset that is the Orthodox Church, and the subset of that, which is the Russian Orthodox Church, which happens to be engaged in some espionage activities in Ukraine, and that's what's going on. That's not the same thing as outlawing an entire religion, and so that creates a problem where good people who would think, hey, that's not right to do that, don't have the background. They're just hearing that headline, and that becomes a problem. Okay. Oh, hold on. Let's highlight that. I agree with Professor. That sounds good to me, but you don't have to in order to have, I mean, you can have your own ideas about how things work, and that's perfectly all right. Let's reasonably talk through that. Okay. Canceling the F-35s might not be a bad thing if they lead to more different stuff. They might not be a bad thing. It's probable that the F-35 is your best plan, but the instability is the issue. Okay. This is interesting. Excuse me. These allergies are kicking my butt. At Professor Gertis explains, do you think that American people truly believe Trump's 350 billion number? When you say American people, I don't think the left generally does, because the left are more informed about Ukraine, generally speaking. And on the right, I think people, it's so frustrating to watch. Like people will just absorb something and not listen critically to it, and they'll just hear like 350 billion. Wow, that's a lot of money. That is a lot of money, but that's not what happened. Now, I don't give credence to, like, there's a I want to say it was a Ukrainian Kiev study, something about some economists put together something, and it's really not 100+ billion. It's really only 18 billion or something like that. Now, they have to allocate it somehow, and this is the official way that they're allocating it. But you can't turn 100 to 150 billion into 350 billion just by saying it, except for he says it and he keeps saying it, and nobody's correcting him. Like, and it like somebody somewhere needs to be correcting him, but it just doesn't happen. Okay, we're at a little over an hour, so I'm going to answer like 3 more questions. If you really have some burning question, I'm happy to answer it. And if not, then we can just be done. So, um, what's this? I'll give your stream a like if you highlight one of my questions in the stream. Does that count, or do I need to highlight a different question? C stub. The other day I was in Greg Terry's chat as he was doing a stream, and I said, if you hit the likes, Greg will sing a song for you or something like that. I think it was said he'll sing the Ukrainian national anthem. And yeah. And so somebody the next day said, what did they say the next day? That if you hit enough likes, Gertis will pronounce 10 unpronounceable Russian cities for you. So I thought it was pretty funny. I'm pretty bad at that. Okay. What do you think of the unannounced delegation from Germany, UK, and France coming to the US is about? I don't know. We'll find out if it's something that we'll find out about. That's news to me. I don't have any insider knowledge in that. Um, I know you're really busy. I sent you an email. How long does it normally take you to respond? Man, I try to respond to what I can respond to. And so I'll try to look for tank and mate, but yeah, sorry. That's not a slight. I promise you. And C Stab says that's good enough. So yay, I got a like out of C Stab for that. Okay. All right, my friends, that's all that I'm going to cover today. Thank you for your time and listening and asking great questions, helping us focus. This actually helps me too, because now it helps me understand what kind of things maybe you're more interested or less interested in, so I can focus my own discussion in my videos. So, all right, I'll see you later. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes and the shares and the subscribes and for being the kind of people that care about Ukraine.